Hey, hi, everybody. My name is Christine Nielsen. I'm one of the librarians here at the university, at the health library. My particular group of people that I work with the most is the nurses. I'm joined today by Mei-Lin Lei. She is going to be managing the chat for me. And we're talking about searching for research instruments. So let's get this show on the road here. All right, so just to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about today, got to do some housekeeping stuff first, as always. We're going to kind of review the objectives. They're pretty straightforward. We're going to talk a little bit about research instruments and copyright, just because we are the library. We gotta mention these things. And then we're going to really kind of get into searching for the research instruments themselves. And we can do questions at the end. We can also do questions throughout. Like I said, Mei-Lin is monitoring chat. So you can type stuff in there. Otherwise, I mean, there's not that many of us, so you can also just unmute yourself and ask a question too. Okay. All right. So as far as housekeeping goes, session is being recorded. So just to be aware of that. I will be after a certain amount of time, it takes a little time for processing. I will be circulating the link, so you can revisit. There's something that you kind of sort of remember but you forget, or you just want to relive the whole experience. That will eventually be making its way to you. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. And we do have an evaluation. We would love it if you would fill it out. Mei-Lin will put the link to that in the chat a little later on. The session today is actually, this is the first time we've offered this one. So while we always want to hear what you have to say, I would particularly like to hear what you have to say about this session today, because it's the first time we've done it. Likewise, Mei-Lin's going to give you a link where you can book an appointment with one of the health librarians online, got an online calendar, and you can just make appointments for consults directly through that. You can find that this isn't quite enough and you need a little more help. Okay. So for this session, basically our objectives boil down to these two things, right? So we're going to talk about field searching in CINAHL and PSYCInfo and how we can use that to look for research instruments. And I'm gonna introduce you to some lists of additional resources, right, for tests and measures. Okay. Actually, before we do the copyright bit, anything anybody want to say or ask at this point? I'm going to take that as no. So let's do this here. Research instruments and copyright. Research instruments are protected by copyright, so you can't necessarily just grab one and use it. There is some scope for using things though. In some cases, like in this one here, the parenting stress index, you actually have to buy it. And there's like a publisher, this is their website, right? And you can see there's like different versions, there's kits, there's manuals, etc., forms. And if you want to use this particular tool with your research, then you need to pay, right? In other cases, there are going to be some like this one here. This is the where is this? The Sterling antenatal anxiety scale, right? And this one has this is a screenshot from an article. It has a statement here saying, yep, you can use it, but you need to cite where you got it from. You need to use the proper crediting and all that kind of thing, and all the stuff that you produce, right? So that's great. Some people make things available without charge. Okay. If it happens that you run across an article and it's got an instrument and there's no indication, like in this one here, that you can just go ahead and use it as long as you cite them, like I actually cited mine, my screenshot here, then you do need to contact the authors and get their permission, right? It goes without saying that you need to stick to the terms of use too, right? So in this one here, this example, it says, well, if you want to use it, you have to cite it. Pretty straightforward, right? The one that we just saw, that parenting stress scale, obviously, if they want you to pay for it to use it, then you can't share it with other people, right? And this is something that's important to think about if you're doing a thesis, right? So quick show of hands with little hand raising thing. How many people here are working on a thesis? We've got a couple, few, so that's good. Yeah, so if you have a tool like the Sterling Antenatal Anxiety Scale, as long as you cite it and do all the things, then you could include that in your thesis. If you are using the other one, well, no, you can't. And this is an important distinction because when you do your thesis, it gets uploaded to MSpace, right? And that's the university's repository. So you have to be careful to make sure that you're complying with copyright in all situations. And if you have questions about copyright and whether it relates to tools or whatever, we recommend you talk to the U of M Copyright Office, right? So there's folks who specialize in copyright here at the university, and they can help you out navigating things. And really, the time to do it is before you write your thesis, right? So Maylin has the email for that. So I'll just get her to put that in the chat for you guys. All right, so copyright obligatory statement aside, how do we find research instruments? There's kind of two scenarios when it comes to this kind of thing. So scenario one, you know you need to use something, but you're not really sure what's out there, and you need to identify some kind of test or measure, right, to use, right? That kind of naturally leads to scenario two, where it's like, you know what you want to use, but you have to get it, right? And so there's a little bit of overlap in which resources that you might use for each of these scenarios. If you're just kind of exploring, you can look in various bibliographic databases that the library subscribes to. We're going to talk about that a bit more in a minute, right? Sometimes people will develop a tool for their dissertation, for their thesis, right? So you can kind of focus on those things as well as just looking at articles to see what people are using. And there are some resources like the Mental Measurements Yearbook, and this is it's a catalog, and it's really nice because it'll give you a description of the tool, but it also tells you who publishes it, right? So you know where to go to get it. And then of course there's always the internet and websites that kind of gather this information together. If you're in scenario two, like I said, you can sometimes find these in journal articles. There's theses, right? Specific websites, and if worse comes to worse, I mean, it's always a bit of a hunt, but you can always try Googling a specific tool as well, right, to find out where it is. So we're going to focus on CINAHL and PSYCInfo. And we're going to start with CINAHL, right? So this is a very small screenshot. So I'm going to flip over to my tab here, so it's a little bit bigger. So this is an item record, right? For this particular article, anxiety, depression, and knowledge level in postpartum women during COVID-19 pandemic, right? And the key to identifying research instruments in something like CINAHL or PSYCInfo is field codes, right? So everything in this record is a field. So the title is a field, the authors is a field, affiliation is another field, language is a field, the abstract is a field. So what you can do is you can say, only look in this field, right? And if you keep looking down the page, CINAHL is kind of nice. It's got this instrumentation field, right? So you can see in this article, they talk about, or like they either used or mentioned some way, the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, participant information form. Sounds like pretty generic tool to me, but anyway. And then there's another knowledge assessment form regarding COVID-19 pandemic process, state trait. And I think that the last one is its own thing, a state trait anxiety inventory. Pardon me. So when you do a search, you can say, only look in this area. Like it doesn't matter if the words you're looking for show up in the abstract, but if you limit to instrumentation, that's going to help you identify tools, right? And in this case, for CINAHL, the wrong one. Abbreviation for this field is IN, right? It's short for instruments. And just to reiterate, this is looking for instruments that are discussed in the article. It might not be the article talking about how they developed the tool, but it might be something that they used, right? But if you're in scenario one, where you're kind of trying to feel out what you want to use, this is still good information. Okay. So let's do a quick sample. I'm going to go to the library's site. If I go to databases A to Z, I can look for the database I want, search for databases, go into CINAHL. Now, in order to do a field search, we got to use the advanced search. Right, so that link is just right over here. And I have multiple boxes, and I can use this drop down where it says select a field. Okay, so I'm going to go until I find, here we go, IN instrumentation. And so anything that I type in the box is going to look in that field, and I'm going to look for COVID and anxiety. Okay. And so you can see I've got 6 results here. I mean, can you imagine if you typed in COVID and anxiety, just like to look in the entire article record, how many things you would get? That would be crazy. But this is nice. It breaks it down, or focuses in, I should say. Right. So let's have a look at this one. Anxiety and fear of COVID-19 among nursing students during the pandemic. Right. So we can go to the record, we can read the abstract, right? Find out what this particular study was all about. And then we can see what they used for their instruments. And it looks like, that's interesting. So this one uses a Turkish language tool. So for me, I can't operate in Turkish, so I would need to find something else. But I can go back and check out the next one. Right. See, what's number 2? Go down. Okay, we got the COVID-19 anxiety scale. That one sounds pretty promising if I'm particularly interested in anxiety related to COVID. And then this Barkley deficits in executive functioning scale, right? So I could make a note. I should look up the COVID-19 anxiety scale. Questions or thoughts at this point? Pretty straightforward. So this brings me to PsycInfo. And PsycInfo, so CINAHL, I should have mentioned earlier, if you don't really have a lot of familiarity with CINAHL. CINAHL is focused on nursing and allied health. There's a lot of different stuff that's covered in there. PSYCInfo is more focused on mental health, psychology, psychiatry, social work, that kind of stuff. And it is a little bit different. So there are two ways to look for instruments in CINAHL, or pardon me, PSYCInfo, I should say. One is the field, right? So in this case, the field code is .tm, and I'll show you how we use that in a second. And the second is their built-in limits. Okay, and this is kind of where things get weird, because they won't necessarily give you the same results. Okay, so like if you are like me and you're into searching and you read the help documentation for PSYCInfo, it says when you use the TM fields in a search, it's doing the same thing that CINAHL did, right? It's looking for words for research instruments that are discussed in the article, right? So maybe they used it, or maybe they're evaluating it or something. And then it says the limit, though, is supposed to limit to the articles that are the development of the tool. However, I've had it work exactly as described. I've also had it not work exactly as described, where the limits thing just does the same thing as the field. So I always am like, for now and ever, I'm going to always recommend that people just try both, right? And see if there's a difference. So let's do that. Okay. I'm going to find my CINAHL. Sorry, PSYCInfo. Here we go. And I'm going to do the same search. So we're going to look for COVID and anxiety. This is a different interface, right? You can see it says Ovid up in the corner. This is a different vendor. So we have to enter our field search differently. We can't just go to the thing and take the drop-down menu to get to the field we want. Right. So in this case, we need to put our search terms in brackets. So COVID and anxiety. And then we need to put a period, and then TM, which stands for tests and measures, and then another period. Okay. So now we can search for this. It says there's 297 things. Right? It's a fair number. So let's see. Just for the sake of argument, let's see what number 1 says. We look at the record here. Again, it's the same thing. Like all these different pieces are different fields, right? So if we keep going, where's my tests and measures? Tests and measures. Here we go. They used a whole pile of tests and measures in this one. So we've got a COVID questionnaire. We've got the hospital anxiety and depression scale. You know, the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, etc. So that COVID anxiety scale isn't here. But because COVID and anxiety both appear somewhere in this list of tests and measures, this article comes back, right? And that might be fine, right? Like maybe, you know, the COVID, I don't know what the COVID questionnaire is, but maybe that's perfectly in line with what we want. We'd need to investigate more, right? I'm just going to click over to the next one. Roll down. Yeah. So there's some different tests lists here, and here we do have the COVID anxiety questionnaire as well. So there's all kinds of things we can investigate. So that was the field search. I'm going to go back, click on search, and I'm going to do a search for COVID and anxiety. And then I am going to limit it using the built-in limits. And we're going to see if it gives us something different. So yeah, so 5,533 have the word COVID and the word anxiety. So what I can do is I can go to additional limits. And this is like all the limits that are possible. And we still have things like English language and, you know, humans and all that kind of stuff. But over here, we've got tests and measures. So let's check that off. We double check that, yep, number 2, that's the one I want to limit. I'm going to limit that search. So now in this case, I got 127. So that number is different than this number, right? Now, might be that all 127 are in here, but maybe they're not, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this one, and I'm going to select OR. And for those of you who are familiar with databases, you're going to know that OR is going to give me more results because I'm saying anything that was in this category or anything that is in this category. And there you go. So 382. So there is a little bit of overlap between them, right? Because if we just added the two numbers together, it would be higher than this. But there is some unique stuff in both, right? So we can scroll through. Maybe, you know, we could do a bit more of a focused search. We could add some terms in to get more at kind of like the area that we're interested in. Like maybe I could add nurses to that or something. If I'm interested in nurses' anxiety during COVID, right? But that's the idea. Any questions or thoughts about that? I know I'm going pretty quick. All right. Well, I'm going to take that as everyone is on board. Okay. So let's head back. Let's say COVID anxiety scale. That's the one I want. Now I got to find it, right? So let's see. I am going to look at a couple of different things. I've got in my screenshots here, I've got Google, I've got a screenshot of the nursing toolkit and part of the psychology toolkit, right? For this one, I'm going to do Google, just because I happen to know that there's not a link to that particular tool on either of the toolkits. So I'm going to do a Google search for COVID-19 anxiety scale. That's what it was. Okay, and I'm going to put this in quotation marks because I want to look for the phrase, right? I don't want things that happen to have all three of those terms, but separate. I want them all together. So what do I get? I get in my results, the first thing, this is, I recognize National Institute of Health. This looks like a PubMed record, right? So this is an article. Yeah, so this is actually a full text article. Looks like this is the development of this particular scale, COVID-19 anxiety scale, right? So I could get the PDF, I could read it, etc. The other stuff that has shown up, let's see, what else we got? We've got another thing from Sage Publications. This is the new COVID-19 anxiety scale, apparently. So that's interesting. Maybe I want to check that out as well. And of course, for whatever reason, Chrome does not like the library resources. All right, so this is the new COVID-19 anxiety scale, which is interesting. I can kind of scroll through and, oh, here's the pattern matrix, et cetera, et cetera. I can read all about how they developed it, right? And then assuming that the final version is in here, maybe as an appendix or something, maybe not. Then I might or might not be able to use it, right? I'm going to go back. Here's, oh, SurveyMonkey, interesting. So this is also a good time to mention that depending on what computer you're at, Google will sometimes give you different results. So I took off my quotes and I wanted to show you something here. So I guess this is technically number 3. So this is about the coronavirus anxiety scale, right? But this is kind of like a third party thing. This is from CAMH. You can tell from the URL up here. CAMH, for anyone who doesn't know, is a major mental health hospital in Toronto, right? So they do a lot of work with mental health and addictions. And so they have actually posted this summary, which is kind of nice because it explains it. What can you do, right? And I know I saw, oh, here we go. The CAS, there's a link here, and it takes you to their development page. And here are all the different versions of it, right? So if I need like the Hindi version, there it is. And you can see, right, when I click on the item itself, it's got some information. It has information about how to score it. And down at the bottom, just a little bigger, this is in the public domain, right? So anybody can use it. You don't have to get any special permission. You don't have to pay for it, right? You just have to use the appropriate citation. So this actually, in my mind, this isn't the new COVID-19 anxiety scale. But to me, this is a little more useful than the PubMed record, right? Because look, there it is, right? So I would encourage you, if you're going to do some Googling for records, that, set aside a little time, because sometimes it's worth exploring beyond like the first hit or two. Any thoughts, questions, or comments? Okay. Fair enough. So, that's Googling. And again, it depends on what you're looking for. Like some things are easier to find than others. I did mention that the library has some toolkits, right? So these are subject guides, and they aren't everything to do with the subject, but they're good starting places. And there are 2 that have sections about measurement tools. So first one, actually, first one I'm going to look at is for the College of Nursing, right? So if you go to the nursing toolkit, there's a whole bunch of different categories. One is faculty and grad students, and underneath that list is measurement tools and instruments. And you can see, like, there's a link to the mental measurements yearbook, right? There's also a link to the PsycLib guide, right? But there's links here to some specific websites. And these are sites that specifically make things available, like, so they have the tests themselves, or they list out ones that are useful, right? So if we go to the RAND surveys and tools, for example, they have some featured surveys, right? So there's some quality of life stuff, medical outcomes study, and you can explore by topic if we keep going, right? So things to do with aging and health, a whole bunch of stuff to do with quality of life, some health economic stuff. We've got maternal, child, and adolescent health, et cetera, et cetera. So, oh, this is interesting. Protective behavioral strategies for marijuana scale. Let's see that one. Right. So in this case, it's going to give you a whole bunch of information about the tool. And then the tool itself, right? So there's a 17 item version, there's a 36 item version, and then there's instructions for how to use it, right? And this is actually an interesting point, because a lot of times you kind of need some instructions about how you're actually supposed to score things, because it's often not just a case of like adding stuff up. So if ever you're looking for tools, try to keep an eye out for instructions and scoring. Okay. So if I want 17, click on that, and here I am, right? It's got the source, which is important. And then also it has some further reading listed at the bottom, which is also pretty important, right? Because we want to understand all the tools that we use in our research. The sites like this, they're great if they happen to be on the topic that you're interested in, right? But not necessarily every site is going to be useful for you, right? So we've got the rehabilitation measures database. If that's your area, that might be great. There's this database is substance use screening and assessment instruments, pardon me. If your area is linked to that, then this would be a good place to look. And again, this is a database. And actually, look. And so it will help you identify things, but then also point you to where it is, right? So let's say I'm just going to look for anxiety. Right. So say I want the excuse me, the Beck anxiety inventory, or actually, sorry, the Beck depression inventory. That one's got a star. Let's try that more. Right. So we've got some information about it. It includes information on how to use it, right? So it says this is copyrighted. You've got to contact Pearson Assessments. You probably have to pay to use this. But it's got all kinds of information here about supporting references and source reference and everything. So that's that. If you are more kind of looking for the psychology stuff, like for example, ProLiquid, that's like patient outcomes. That's not really going to be your interest. The psychology LibGuide also has a section on tests and measures, right? So they have some databases that you could look. So we had a look at PsycInfo, right? There's some others. I guess there's an ETS test collection. I am not sure what focus of that one is, but you could always have a look. And then they have some additional resources as well. These are different ages, I'm thinking 2016, 2019. Yeah. How does this grab everybody? Super quiet today. All right, so this pretty much brings me to the end of the prepared content. Any questions? Has anyone tried looking for instruments and had a particularly difficult or easy time of it? All right. yeah, so I guess if nobody wants to chat about searching for instruments, bring up any particular scenarios, try anything out in particular, we can call it a day. Just as a reminder, we do have an evaluation form that we'd love it if you would fill out. And hopefully this is useful. It's always tricky to find this kind of material. So it's a bit of a hunt, but hopefully this will at least make things a little easier. Thanks very much for coming. Have a great day.